Aloha and welcome, everyone. We want to thank you all so much for joining us this morning, afternoon, or evening, wherever you might be in the world, and officially want to extend a very warm welcome to our 2025 OLP series, Japanese Online Language Pedagogy. My name is Sarah Boutin. I've been serving as the series facilitator for the OLP webinar series for, I think this is my 8th year doing it. And I can honestly say that I'm one of the very lucky people who absolutely loves what they do for a living. And one of my favorite parts of being an educator online is the privilege of facilitating this series. So I do want to thank all of you very much for being part of this. And the summer 2025 LOP series kind of started with an idea we had a few years ago, in that we wanted to really get into some of the less commonly taught language and really dig into the meat of how we teach these languages online. And so this is our third year in this format where we have our panelists and we basically have a conversation that flows pretty organically. And it's been a lot of fun. I've really enjoyed doing it, and I'm hoping that all of you will get quite a lot out of it. Just a few quick housekeeping items to go over before we start. This series is officially sponsored by the U.S. Department of Education, but please note that the Department of Education is not endorsing or vetting anything shared today during our webinars, and the opinions that are expressed during this webinar are the opinions of the panelists and not the Department of Education. I also want to take you on a quick little field trip, and I'm going to share the link to our webinar series website in the chat with all of you. And I want to take you out there quickly. It might be helpful to bookmark this, but I did want to just take everyone out in case you haven't looked too far at this, just so that way everybody can see what we have here. Okay, so you should be able to see my screen. So all of the days and times are listed. I know a lot of people are joining from different time zones. We've got you covered, and you can see the different time zones that are listed here. If yours isn't mentioned, you can kind of do the math either way and figure out what times we'll be meeting. But this will be the same time for all three of our sessions. So Monday, August 4th, Wednesday, August 6th, and Friday, August 8th. We will be doing our course design portion today, Liter Interaction on Wednesday, and Learn Support on Friday. You can see all of our pretty panelists here and a little bit of information about the format. Now, I wanted to talk briefly about our digital badge. This is a great option, especially for those who are looking to potentially earn CEU credit for our sessions. But we do offer a digital badge, and if you click on this link, it will take you out to the information about our digital badges. Now, there is a little bit of homework that you have to do for these, but I think it's a great way to really sum up everything that we've done. I'm very guilty of sometimes passively listening to webinars and not really implementing what I'm learning. But through earning the badge, you're able to really implement the things that we're talking about and potentially add something new to your teaching. So I do want to encourage everyone to consider earning the badge. And if you are an educator who requires CEU credit for continuing education, this might be an option for you. Please check with your local licensing agency, but it might be a good way to earn some CEU credits. So all of the digital badge criteria is listed here. I will talk a little bit more about this on Friday for our last session, and you can see all the different things that we offer. We've got some Q&A content down here too, but a lot of great things to offer. And so I do hope that you will consider potentially earning the digital badge if that is something that you might be interested in. And then during our time today, please be sure to share your own thoughts, opinions, or maybe even questions you might have in the chat. And we will check the chat periodically, but the way that we'll go is typically we have our panel discussion for the first hour and a half, and then usually for the remaining 45 minutes of our session, we will go to questions that come in from the audience. So without further ado, I want to get into our discussion today. And I do want to have all of our panelists introduce themselves and share a little bit about their background and maybe even how they became Japanese teachers. So I'll warmly invite Dr. Luft to please introduce yourself and let us know a little bit about who you are.
All right. Hi, everyone. I'm Stephen Luft. I teach Japanese at the University of Pittsburgh. I'm also currently serving as Vice President of the American Association of Teachers of Japanese, one of the two vice presidents. I'm the one representing post-secondary education. I'm currently serving as resident director of the Konan Year in Japan program. It's a study abroad program for college students. I'm hailing from Kobe right now, where it's very early in the morning, but I'm very happy to be here. I'm also a co-author of the Nihongo Now Japanese language textbook series. Um, and for how I got into Japanese, two parts of that. I grew up in Seattle, and I'd had a friend who was interested, in Japanese comic books. I got interested into manga a bit, and I was kind of like flip-flopping between German and Japanese in high school, and they cut the German program that year, so I took Japanese. Later, I was a missionary for my church, and spent 2 years in Japan doing that and learning the language and falling in love with the people and the culture, and just decided to stick with it after that. So studied Japanese at Brigham Young University, did my graduate work at Ohio State University. So that's just a little bit about me, and very happy to be here this morning or afternoon or evening, wherever you
Much appreciated. I think that's the first time I've ever been happy to hear the language program was cut because we're very glad to have you with us. So thank you, Love Sensei. Let's move to Magara Maeda Sensei, if you don't mind sharing a little bit about yourself and maybe about how you became a Japanese teacher, please.
Hi, my name is Magara Maeda, and I've been teaching Japanese mainly the first year and the second year level at University of Wisconsin, River Falls, and it's in a distance learning mode. So I've been there since 2008, and um, lately I've been really trying to integrate AI into my teaching. So the try to make my curriculum more AI enhanced. So that's my interest nowadays. And how I became a Japanese language teachers. When I was in Japan learning English, I got lots of help from the US missionary people in Japan, Mormon people. So I really wanted to return something back to their kindness. So I thought, well, that day the teaching Japanese in, overseas was so popular. So, okay, this is it. I can do it. So that's how I become a Japanese language teacher in the US. All right. And then I love pickleball. Okay. Thank you.
Oh, that story warms my heart, Maeda Sensei. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. And let's move to Kazuko Saito Sensei, if you can please share a little bit about yourself. Thank you.
Hi, はじめまして、皆さん, everyone. Thank you very much for introducing me. My name is Kazuko Saito, and I teach Japanese online at the Hunter College at the City University of New York, and it's the public institution. And also, I also teach Japanese at the secondary school in New York. And this is not online, this is in person. So I can experience a little bit of online and what works for the in person and vice versa every day. And so and maybe some of you already know about me. I'm a founder and also planning committee of Boston, New York study group, and also Human Library for Japanese Teachers, which we use the online settings and we put the PDs, the Japanese teachers PD in the online settings and how it works effectively and for the even the PD settings for the online. And the how I became a Japanese teacher. The first, I was an exchange student to actually Washington State, Stephen Sensei, and yeah, Washington State. And at that time, I was learning English there and taking some classes. And then I start to wonder what I can do in the future. And then I came back to Japan and I went to the Japanese teachers school and became a Japanese language teacher. And actually, I participated JLEX program for the first year cohort, and I was sent to Indiana. And that was like long time ago, but that was the beginning. And in New York, like I'm here since 2012, I think. And because of my family moved to New York after like we've been to like France and Tennessee and everywhere. So that's like, where I am right now. And besides the Boston, New York study group and everything, I recently appointed a president of the Northeast Council of Teachers of Japanese. And also, like, I became a co-chair of the JPAS network, so which is the nationwide research project that we are doing right now. Thank you.
Fantastic. And New York's very lucky to have you, Saito Sensei. Thank you very much for joining us. And next, let's go to my good friend and colleague, Revae Bostwick Sensei. Please go ahead.
Hello, everybody. So glad to be here today. I've been teaching with North Carolina Virtual Public Schools now for about 11 years. I also teach English as a second language in elementary schools in a face-to-face school. But I came about learning Japanese and wanting to be a Japanese teacher after experiencing some time on the JET program. So if you have any high school students, I always like to put in a little plug for high school students so that they can start thinking about that after graduation, because if they wait until the time they graduate, it's too late. You want to get that right before the interview in their last year of college. So I'd be happy to talk to them about that. But I really enjoyed my time in Japan. And that's actually why I came back to be an ESL teacher, because I felt, just as some of you mentioned, I felt so supported and taken care of while in Japan. I wanted to return that favor when I came back to the United States. So I wanted to make sure I could help the English learners here in the United States master their English. So I also enjoy, though, teaching Japanese online. So I'm happy to be here with you all today.
I just love the spirit of giving back that seems to unite this group. So I want to thank all of you again for taking the time to be with us and really looking forward to diving into the conversation. So let's jump right to our first question. And again, this is kind of from the lens of course design, but if you feel that there are other things that you've noticed in your travels of teaching, please feel free to share other aspects or stories. So the first question is, which aspects of Japanese do you think are the most challenging to teach online? And Revae Sensei, let's go ahead and start with you.
Thank you. One of the things I find most difficult is the interpersonal communication, because they don't get a lot of opportunities unless they are watching maybe some anime that they understand. They're not getting a lot of opportunities to hear good examples of what that sounds like and what that looks like. So that's one of the most difficult that I have found to teach. And Sarah, do you also want us to talk now about how we're trying to change our course design, or just talk about what we find difficult right now?
Oh, any or all. I think anything related to course design, since you and I have really been in the trenches of that for many years.
Yes.
Our participants would love to hear about that.
Okay, so in order to try to combat that recently, what I've been working on in our new course development is trying to put in more of those modeled conversations for students to hear, but then also for them to participate in. And maybe that looks like they have to just continue the thread of the conversation that gets started for them. So maybe we have the first half and then they have to just continue the conversation. Or maybe they just have to answer the questions. Just some sort of scaffolding in there so that we don't just say, hey, make a conversation, because some of them are not going to really know where to start. And when they do try it, it doesn't turn out right. So I think we have to provide a lot of models and some scaffolding. Now I'm thinking right now of asynchronous timing, but if it's synchronously, then I also think it might be a good idea if we have modeled conversations that students have to maybe read through and go through on their own with a partner. Because I don't know about you, but when I've put students in breakout rooms before and say, practice this conversation without scaffolding and modeling, it's crickets. Or they're talking in English saying, do you know what we're supposed to do? I don't know what we're supposed to do. So I think having some models and maybe some structured conversation or sentence and question starters is going to be really helpful to help combat that.
I think everyone can relate to the dread of the crickets or resorting back to conversations in English. So I agree that that modeling is a great way to engage the students, but it also helps them to break the ice a little bit and maybe get a little bit more comfortable in putting themselves out there and getting some ideas as to what kinds of things they could potentially say. Excellent. Thank you so much for that, Revae. And now let's go to Maeda Sensei. Which aspects of Japanese do you think are the most challenging to teach online?
Okay, so first of all, it's all depending on what online learning environment you are in, right? Could be 100% asynchronous or 100% synchronous, or like me, blended, which is a combination of asynchronous and synchronous, right? So I'm talking from my own experience, which is a blended instruction. And I'd like to address two things. And first one, it is really obvious that the teaching distinctive cultural aspect, such as gestures and hands-on cultural activities online. For example, how to exchange business card, 名刺, politely, or handing something over to others with two hands, right? In the class, submitting assignment or handing out the handouts, right? And making sure that correct orientation is facing towards the receiver, right? So these small gestures carry out lots of meanings in Japanese culture. And students can learn YouTube video, or I can explain just like what I explained right now. But learning happens when you're doing it, right? People learn by doing it, and they are kind of tough to practice online. We can still do it, but it's not so natural. Then, and the second challenge is teaching the Japanese writing system, especially feedback and assessment. Like for those collecting the writing character assignment, usually students have to take a picture of that assignment and then upload, and then teacher will give the feedback. And I usually use the learning system, Canvas learning management system. So Canvas app with iPad with stylus pen. So I can, really correct the students writing. But if you do not have those device, then that's going to be pretty difficult. And also that leads into the second point, finding the right balance between handwriting and typing. So online, it's so easy to submit everything online, typing, right? But we live in a digital age, then typing is definitely important. And people are writing by hand less and less. So, but I believe that handwriting still holds significant cultural and cognitive value in the Japanese society and Japanese language education. So in my class, I try to include it in class, not just for learning characters per se, but as a cultural practice too. So let me quickly talk about the cognitive and the pedagogical benefits of the handwriting, right? As you know, the research has shown that handwriting supports deeper learning, leading into long-term acquisition and deeper understanding, especially with complex script like kanji. So typing is way easier and makes sense when the students are submitting the writing assignment or character writing online, but relying solely on the typing is often result in the student who can only read but not write. So they can recognize but cannot write, right? So the Dr. Masako Douglas at California State University, Long Beach, gave a really, really brilliant presentation on this, how to teach kanji today. So I highly recommend you to watch her video. And actually, she is among the audience today, so we can ask her about that. And so that said, I include both handwriting and typing assessment or assignment for specific purpose. So then, so handwriting at the beginning, students will learn how to, the new character, hiragana, but then as soon as they learn that, I will introduce the typing so that they can type the comment on the Canvas discussion or Padlet or write an email to me in Japanese, right? At the very early stage, or type in the Zoom chat window. So that's how I combine both of them. And then also, I think this is really important to give choice to your students. Whenever it's possible and appropriate, I give choice my students. You can do this assignment either handwritten or typing. Right, thank you, that's all.
That's a trend that I'm noticing more and more, is that more educators are trying to find ways to give their students that choice and the voice so they can decide for themselves what do they want their learning experience to look like. But I completely echo your sentiments about the importance of learning handwriting. And I remember my own personal experience when I was first learning basic hiragana. I realized that I'm actually a very kinesthetic learner, and the process of writing and learning the stroke order, but it's also just soothing to the spirit, I think. So thank you so much for sharing that with us, Maeda Sensei. And then Love Sensei, let's move to you. And again, the same question. Which aspects of Japanese do you think are the most challenging to teach online?
Yeah, thanks. So I'll first just echo something that Bostwick Sensei said. I find that the speaking and listening aspects are a bit more tricky than the reading and writing aspects. Just the nature of the writing system, like we have writing systems because there is a need for asynchronous communication, right? People that are not face to face needing to communicate with each other. So I think there's a lot there that lends itself really well to online learning and asynchronous communication. But speaking and listening, I think, is a little more difficult. There's a couple aspects in particular. I think like Aizuchi is kind of difficult to do online, right? Just because there's a little bit of a lag, and so it's hard to get the students to do it at the right timing. I think that's a lot easier just in person. I think like Deixis, can be difficult to do online. In the classroom, I'll put an object in front of me, an object in front of the student, an object somewhere else, and I'll ask about, which object is which, right? But you just don't have that same control over the space in an online environment. So I think that's tricky. I'll mention a couple more things that I find tricky that I think we've actually been able to do something about a little bit. I think for things like Aizuchi, we just haven't gotten a good answer for how to do that. Even synchronous online. But one is building a sense of community with the students. We've found that that's a lot more difficult in an online environment than in person. They'll talk with each other after class when it's an in-person environment. But it's just harder to get them to know each other and get them like interacting with each other and get them to really have that sense of community. And I'll just mention briefly like our program at the University of Pittsburgh. So currently we're really focused on in-person instruction, but our summer program is all online virtual instruction now. And the way we structure that program is that it's broken up into synchronous sessions where everybody's coming together, but the synchronous sessions are basically like 100% in Japanese. And then there's asynchronous lectures the students watch, and then there's also office hours where students can come in and ask questions and get answers if they need to. So kind of mostly synchronous just in terms of how we're balancing that, but we've also got a bit of asynchronous in there. So one thing we've been trying to do to build community is just having some activities that are not, we're not learning language. We're maybe not even using it that much. We're just like getting together and doing something. And we've done, some things virtually that way. This year, strangely, everybody that was participating in our online program was actually locally in Pittsburgh. Some of them are, far enough away that it would probably be difficult to come to the university every day. But they were all local enough that our instructor, Shun Maruyama, who's had some great ideas and some great things for our program, but he actually scheduled an in-person meetup and got all the students to come together. I don't think you can do that in just any, online program. But just making some efforts there to try and improve that sense of community with students. I'll also mention two other things. One is that like when it's in person, we've got native speakers from Japan that are at our university studying internationally, and it's a lot easier to get students connected with them and have experiences using the language with native speakers outside of the classroom. That's a lot more difficult in an online environment. But we've been using Talk Abroad to assign students activities where they're using the language with a native speaker outside of the classroom in our virtual classes. And I can talk a little bit more about that later if you like. The last thing I'll mention is in an online environment, I think it's easier for students to cheat, and I think it's harder to catch them at it. And I don't have a really great answer for that one either, but I think that's another thing that's a bit difficult.
That is definitely another challenge. And I think AI plays into it quite a lot. And it's a very big topic that, that definitely is really challenging. So, academic integrity. But you also said a lot of things that I think a lot of us resonate with, the importance of the connection. So, not just the student to student connection, but making connections with native speakers. I mean, I can certainly vouch that was how I really leveled up, was through my friendships with native speakers. So great stuff in there. Thank you very much for that, Love Sensei. And now let's go ahead and move to our second question. And Revae, you actually touched a little bit upon this, but scaffolding. So I'd love to know from all of you, how do you work with scaffolding whenever students are reading or writing? And where do you think Japanese students are more likely to need scaffolding in the online classroom? Saito Sensei, if you don't mind, let's start with you, please.
Okay, I thought I was gonna talk about the difficult part, but okay, all right, that's fine. So the scaffolding. Actually, I was gonna first say, thank you very much, Dr. Luft Sensei, because I was gonna talk about the assessment. Online teaching isn't my something special. And I wanted to say online is no longer a substitute for in-person teaching. Online is something we really need to use our knowledge to make it special, and we have to put it a lot of effort for make it works. And I was thinking of difficulty. I know I have to talk about something different, but I just wanted to follow up with the Luft Sensei. And the most challenging part for me is the assessment that I was gonna say, and I had a whole answer for that, but it's okay. All right. So and scaffolding for the writing and reading, right? Yes, and it's also connect with my online courses. And I actually used my online course. It's the fully synchronous course, but also my course is flipped learning, flipped classroom, and synchronous online and flipped learning approach. It's combined. It's called something called Sofra, and I've been using this Sofra method and for my online teaching. And it's honestly that's the makes scaffolding is much easier because of the structure, and student can get used to it every time we have online classes, which my college twice a week, and they have to start with step 1 of Sofra, which is the pre-work and pre-assignment. So, and then we follow the Sofra cycle, and then we usually start with the Tadoku time, extensive reading time, which was introduced by Cook Sensei and Takahashi Sensei, and in 2022 at the one of the conference, and it's called Chokoto Tadoku. And like we are using part of the classroom time for engaging the reading time. And that's the start of my entire course design, and starting with a lot of input by using the Tadoku time. But I have to a little bit of like give them like the approach that's Tadoku time, like don't ever stop like start using dictionaries, and they have to keep reading. And most of my student, except for the international student, exchange student, international student, they are grown up with the most of the public education system in New York, and they build a good fundamental of context clue already from the K-12 education. And with using this context clue, and I emphasis on it is very important. It's the Japanese, probably new language, but you have to use the picture and you have to use the context, and then like try to figure out. It's like learning backwards and like using the technique, and they have to build their vocabularies and grammars. So, and don't stop. And oh my gosh, we don't know this kanji. Saito sensei never taught me this. No, that's not the approach. Like they have to figure out. Okay, so that this Chokoto Tadoku time is really helps my student to develop that attitude. And also that like this project reads at the end of the course, and the final project, it's called We Author project. We Author is student will become the Tadoku book authors. But doing this, like I'm not giving them like, oh, now you have to write the book. It's not like that. Okay, we are using a lot of techniques, and I learned from the CUNY Graduate Center. And one of the method I would like to introduce here is the group writing. Okay, no, I'm sorry, group reading and writing. And group reading, we as a project, we ask students to put their works on the online platform that CUNY offers, and everybody can see their materials. It's the open educational resources already, so student can read the previous year cohort student wrote those like books. And then using these books, and we introduce as a pre-work Kisho Tenketsu format. It's the very Japanese, like the format that's for introducing and development and twist, and then conclusion. And together with them, and we are going to read as a group, and like how your previous year's student work into this Kisho Tenketsu, and also what's happened. So they start to learn the format of the writings, and they start to build like idea. Oh, okay, so we can do the same things. And then so like we do a lot of practice with using this one. So by the time like they have to write individually, like the final project, they have confidence and they are ready to write their idea into the work. So like my course has together with this flipped learning, and also like this course design and entire group, and together with Hunter College is very unique. Instead of TA, we call it senpai supporters, and I receive senpai supporter and with the advanced student, and they are always there with me, and they are supporting the students learn. So that's also like roles in a big support of like student learning. Okay, thank you.
Saito Sensei, I love it. When you said flip classroom, immediately my heart leapt because I'm so in love with the idea of it. So thank you for sharing that with us. But it seems like your students are going through a progression where they are working with maybe a kanji they don't know, and they have to get comfortable with being uncomfortable, right? So they move through that process, and then at the very end, you're really getting into those upper level blooms where you're telling the students to teach me what I have taught you. And I absolutely love your story and how that's going in and working with the students. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I do apologize. I just realized I hadn't actually asked you about the aspects that you think are most challenging. And you mentioned assessment. Which, yes, absolutely, that is definitely challenging. And you told us quite a bit about the assessments. But anything else you want to add to that question? And I do apologize for not asking you initially, but just generally challenging, what's challenging about teaching Japanese online?
Well, if I can add one more thing, I was gonna introduce the word marugoshi. And I don't know, like here, like the marugoshi is the what I wanted to say about the assessment, like student, especially online classrooms, like they are in front of the laptop or like iPad, like any devices. Okay, so they already have like some like the supporting system for them, and then like assessment, it's hard. Okay, so like I said, I teach online and also in person. In person, like in this context, it's rather easy. Like I just tell student, okay, put away your devices and like no cheating, and you have to put textbook away, worksheet away. So that's it. But like for the online teaching, I really, really, really need to follow the World Readiness National Standard, like 3 modes of communication. And I include for my college class interpersonal speaking and also presentational speaking. And I tell them this has to be spontaneous. And especially for the interpersonal speaking, it has to be unrehearsed. And I really need to assess their proficiency rather than performance. So I often include those proficiency in my course, but it's like taking time, and like some student feels, oh, I don't know, I don't remember, and they start in English. So like I really need to change my student mindset as well. So I keep telling them it's okay, it's okay, it's the formative assessment like during the class, and let's get let's make the mistakes here and we can learn together. That's the like message I always say to them. Thank
Love
you.
that message of let's make the mistakes here because that is ultimately how we level up by making those mistakes. And you're creating that environment where they can get uncomfortable and be okay with being uncomfortable. And that's really going to help them level up in the ladder of proficiency. Thank you so much for that, Saito Sensei. Great feedback there. And then let's go to Maeda Sensei. So it's the same second question. Which aspects are, sorry, how do you work with the scaffolding with when students are reading or writing? And then where are Japanese students more likely to need that scaffolding in the online classroom?
Okay, so these scaffolding strategies are not exclusive to online learning or the Japanese language. So if you are already doing the great, scaffolding in the regular class, just transfer that one, right? Then I usually break the reading and writing tasks into 3 phases: before, during, and after. So before the task, I often use a KWL chart, like what you know about this topic or what you want to know, what you learned about this topic. So using KWL to tap into what the students already know about the topic of the reading or writing, or get them curious about that. Then you can do this on the asynchronous day. When I do that, I usually use Padlet, and during the synchronous session, I use the Zoom whiteboard. Then talk about that. And this is a great time that I can also introduce the vocab key words that students really need to know to go through this reading and the writing. And also, you can layer activities, like start with the smaller chunks, like when they are reading, for example, skimming for known element, like, find the kana or the katakana words or number or dates or keywords. and then let student guess about what this reading is about. Then you can also build a keywords together with the students and give them, okay, you can use these keywords. Seems like everybody needs to know this one. So and then the next is during the task. I often encourage, well, if you are doing this during the synchronous session, I often encourage to work with peer. That's okay to ask your partner or, so, and then get the peer feedback so that you don't feel like they are doing it all alone, right? And help each other. And you can also provide additional supports or resources, like, for example, for the reading, I can add some hiragana, or there's two apps that students can add hiragana with. And then also, particularly for the asynchronous session, text-to-speech tool, like there's an online, AI tool called Natural Readers. They are really helpful. The students cannot, read these kanji, but then use this text-to-speech tool. Then, oh, it's reading out. Oh, I see. Now I understand, right? So I can provide some of these like helping tools. And then after the task, I sometimes ask students to reflect on what they learned and how they get through the task, right? So you can do this asynchronously or synchronously with using like a Google form or a Padlet or a Zoom whiteboard. So you just ask these questions. What was the most difficult part? What strategies did you use? What's the keyword you needed to know? What's the new word you learned, right? Etc. So I think this really helps students, give them a chance to think about their own learning process and the strategies. Right? That's all.
I love that. And it is important as we're leveling up in our Japanese to know, okay, these are some of the things that I sometimes struggle with, or maybe these are some of my strengths. So I love that you have that way for students to really reflect on their own learning styles. It's excellent. Thank you so much, Maeda Sensei. And let's go to Love Sensei next. And again, the same question. How do you work with scaffolding when students are reading or writing? And where are Japanese students more likely to need to use scaffolding in an online classroom?
Yeah, I'll first just reiterate something that Maeda Sensei said before. When I first started doing online teaching, I had a really hard time with handwriting and really getting students, to understand how to write characters and how it's different, just because it was really hard to demonstrate. And the university gave me like a Lenovo tablet and a stylus, and it just was not working. But I was able to do a bit of negotiating, and I got an iPad and an Apple Pen. And once that happened, then I could actually demonstrate, in an online environment, how to write. The pencil feature is actually sensitive to how hard you press with the Apple Pen on the tablet. So you can demonstrate how to hane, and when you do it in the online environment, it looks like you're actually, fading that stroke out. So I thought, that ended up for me just being like, absolutely necessary for doing handwriting in an online environment. Just couple other things for scaffolding. Like Saito Sensei said, I think our students, sometimes they see a reading passage, and they see a couple kanji they don't know, and they just, they think, I don't know this, right? So getting them to be strategic readers and using reading strategies when they approach a text, I think is very important. One way that we do that at the early stages is, as soon as they know katakana, we start giving them worksheets that are authentic materials. We'll do newspaper articles, for example, and we'll have questions about the article that they can figure out if they know katakana, and maybe, use a little bit of common sense, right? So for example, like there'll be a sports article. Sports articles are pretty straightforward. You're going to find out who won, who lost, how it was done, right? And we'll ask questions like, where was this team from? What were the names of the teams? Where are the teams from, right? And if they're able to scan that article for katakana words and they're able to figure out, the word from English that the katakana word represents, then they're able to actually figure out a lot of information about what's going on in that newspaper article. So I think that's a good way to get students used to the idea that they don't need to know every single word that they're reading to get a lot of content out of something. I think I'll also mention just for katakana, we do a bit of work just with, lots of practice, but also going over like rules for that as a scaffolding for helping students to know how to use those. So, for example, like TH in English often gets realized as an S or a Z when it's put in katakana. Or if an English word ends in a consonant, oftentimes it'll have an U sound added to the end for katakana. Giving students those rules and then giving them practice so they can really get used to working with those words and figuring out what the original word is. Lastly, I'll just mention a couple of the strategies that we teach when we're doing reading strategies. We talk about, hypothesizing. We talk about reading things through twice. We talk about guessing. And I spend a little bit of time actually talking about what makes good guessing and what makes bad guessing. I think the educational system trains our students a little bit to think outside the box, which usually isn't a bad thing. But if you're dealing with a reading that is just written for a person, right? Naturally, like a guess that is more prototypical, that is more common, is going to be a better guess than something that's just kind of like way outside there, right? I did one article, it was a newspaper article with my students, and it's about a zoo, right? And then there's this unfamiliar kanji that's clearly an animal, So guessing like a tiger or a lion or something, I mean, that's like pretty good. That makes sense, right? Guessing like an ocelot or, a pangolin or something that's like not like prototypical, there's just less chance that that's actually going to be what they're talking about, right? So we talk about what makes a good guess and the fact that, stuff that's more common, that's more prototypical, is more likely to be right in this type of situation. So that's just a little bit of the support we provide for our students.
In the West, I think we spend a lot of time really trying to push our students outside of the box. We want them to be innovative and think up new things. But the animal analogy, just kind of sticking with that, typically where I am in the United States, if I hear hoof prints outside, it's probably a horse and not a zebra. So yes, we want to make sure that we're steering our students in what's more likely versus maybe something a little bit more untraditional. Thank you for that, Love Sensei. And then Bostwick Sensei, let's wrap this question up with you. And once again, same question. How do you work with scaffolding when your students are reading or writing? And where are Japanese students more likely to need that scaffolding in the online classroom?
So I was thinking about this as other people were talking. I had a different answer, but I was also thinking about the fact that in Japanese, that if you're writing it correctly, all of the letters from every single word in your sentence are all connected together. And you can't tell where one word stops and the next word starts if you're not familiar with the vocabulary. So I think it's important that we expose our students to a number of vocabulary and the vocabulary that are utilized in your text, so then they can look at how they can break that text apart into the vocabulary chunks that you're wanting them to know. Because otherwise they don't know, am I supposed to read this as wa or ha? They don't know because it's all connected together and they don't know where to stop. So I think teaching them the vocabulary words that are going to be utilized in your paragraph is really, really important. And we have students now that many people have talked about the ability to use different types of tools to be able to do their assignments for them, so to speak. So we have some students coming to Japanese 3 who actually really don't know all of the hiragana yet. They have somehow been able to get through the courses before us without knowing all of the hiragana. So sometimes we have to scaffold their reading at the hiragana level and maybe give them little hints. Is this ma or is it ha? Try to get them to figure out, okay, let me see. I know it's one of those two, but which one is it? Also, I think it's important that we practice vocabulary. And in our coaching materials that I'm working on now, students are going to categorize the vocabulary. They'll have their list of vocabulary and say, okay, are these things that you do at a festival or are these things that you can eat at a festival? So which one are those? So that gives them a chance to read the vocabulary, to practice the vocabulary, and then the coach can also help them with the pronunciation of the vocabulary if necessary. Another idea I got was that maybe our students need scaffolding who they don't know how to read the sentence as a whole. And in the online environment, sometimes it's quiet again, right? They're just waiting, but you don't know. Is it the first character they're having trouble with? Is it the middle character? Is it the last character? What is the problem here? We are not sure. So we need to create a safe learning environment for our students so that they feel safe to make mistakes, that they feel safe that if their pronunciation is terrible, it is okay. We're not laughing at them. It's the whole reason we're here is to help them learn. So it might also be a good idea that some of the sentences that the coach just goes ahead and reads them aloud to the students at first, has them say it offline, or you can have them turn their mic on and practice that pronunciation, and then go and have them read some paragraphs or sentences on their own, but they've already heard some of that pronunciation in advance from the coach, so it won't be starting from scratch for them. So I was just thinking that that might be some ways that they could scaffold that reading for them.
I love all that, Revae. And just a little bit of background for those of you not familiar with the program we have at North Carolina Virtual Public School. We are very lucky to work with a group of coaches that meet students in Zoom rooms, very much like this, and work with them in small groups. So they're able to get that instant feedback. And it's also just a fun, positive learning environment. I see several of my coaches here that I work with, and I'm very, very lucky to work with such an amazing team. So just want to thank all of them. But it's a great resource for the students, and we're very lucky to have it, which actually that's a good segue into our next question about resources. And Revae, if you don't mind, we'll start with you. What criteria do you use to determine if a resource is appropriate for your online classroom? There's lots of resources out there. Some of them are great. Some of them are interesting. So I'd love to hear from you about what criteria do you use to determine if a resource is appropriate for your classroom.
Okay, well, thank you. And thank you so much for also explaining about coaching, because I forgot that I said that without giving any indication as to what that was. So thank you. One of the important things is, does it accomplish the task or the target of the language learning that you have set out for your assignment? Also, we like to make sure that it's roughly 90%-ish comprehensible by students if it is going to be just independent reading. Also, for NCVPS, we have a blessing and a curse where all of our materials have to make sure that they are copyright free. We can't just post anything up there. We have to have a source, and now we often have to have those resources be on a United States webpage and not from another country. So we have a lot of criteria we have to meet before we can utilize it in our courses. So we have to utilize those things. We've also looked at things like text readers, and some of you mentioned some other text readers today that I'm going to try after we finish this meeting, because the ones we've tried so far to utilize in our course to just do a text-to-speech read aloud in Japanese have not been good pronunciation for us so far. So I'm interested to learn about the other tools that you have all mentioned to see if those work better for us.
Yes, absolutely. And as I said, some resources are great, some of them are maybe not so great, and some we just can't use at all. And another thing that I just wanted to throw out there, just in my travels, it's something very near and dear to my heart, is my mother was a special education teacher for many, many years, but just making sure that we're using UDL standards and focusing on accessibility, as Revae and I are both in a K-12 environment. So that's another great criteria that we have to use as well, is just making sure that it's available and accessible for all of our students. And if it doesn't reach all of our students, maybe it's not the best fit for us, but there's just so many things. And you did a great job, Revae, on touching on some of the important criteria for us. So thank you for that. And let's go to Maeda Sensei. What criteria do you use to determine if a resource is appropriate for your online classroom?
Well, when you say resources, I can think of so many resources. Like, for example, first one is a facilitator, TA. So some other teachers mentioned that online environments, it's so difficult to have access to native speakers. But usually universities, they might have a international student from Japan. So I always utilize those. So I for my Zoom class, I have a native Japanese speaking student as a facilitator. So that during the breakout room, or we have a two breakout room opened, one with the facilitator, one with me. And then also I utilize the facilitator as a cultural resource. What's going on in Japan? What do the university students do over the weekend? Those things that I'm not, I'm not really familiar with now anymore. So I use them as a great human resources. And then what determines if a resource is appropriate. Okay, so thank you for mentioning about accessibility. This is particularly true for the technological resources. So I always think, can student access it on different device, like smartphone or tablet? Many students complete the assignment using the smartphone. So can they see it, clearly? And then also, like too many downloads. Like, so can they get by without having to download 5 different apps, or I avoid anything that requires too many logins or external apps, unless necessary. So keep it simple. And for the technology use, I limit myself to introducing just 1 or 2 new technological tool per semester, so that students don't get overwhelmed. And then as for the learning resources, like Saito sensei, my classroom is a flipped classroom, so that asynchronous session, students needs to learn the new grammar and vocabulary. So flip lesson, usually we use the video, grammar learning video, so that video, make sure it's less than 10 minutes long. Well, 10 minutes is even long, right? So that make sure it's really short and concise. And I also provide them the multiple resources. And well, there's no absolutely one perfect, video to explain this, grammar perfectly. So I usually give them some choices, or there's, 2 other great ones. So you choose. And also, if you don't like watching the video, you can still read the textbook explanation, or this website explains well, or you can ask AI to explain. So I will give them lots of choices. And then, so that, and as for the learning resources, that I think about the flexibility across the task. What do you mean by flexibility? That's something I can build up or simplify depending on the level, language level, because I'm teaching 2 different levels. So can I use this resource for both levels? Can I, flexibly use that? And also, can I use this material for all 3 modes of communications? That would be wonderful. And can I reuse this material, reuse often multiple contexts, like just like I mentioned, across the different, students level. So those are really important. And also cultural relevance and engagement. Is this learning material, culturally rich, and it's really engaging for the students? And scaffolding, we discussed about the scaffolding, right? So is this material have a scaffolding potential? Maybe this is a great material, but there's no way I can come up with a good scaffolding, activities, then I'm not going to use it. So these are the things I usually consider. But like you mentioned, accessibility and the universal design and copyrights, they are really, really important too. Thank you.
These are all really important things to consider. And you also touched upon reusability. And I love the idea of finding resources that work for multiple things, maybe even multiple modes of communication. And you also touched upon the overwhelm. And while we might have a million different tools, we might want to cherry pick different things for it. Our students do get overwhelmed. And so we want to make sure that we're keeping them engaged and coming back every day to keep learning Japanese with us. So we don't want to do too much with technology. It's a balance, and we kind of have to find the right mix with everything. So thank you for that, Maeda Sensei. And Saito Sensei, let's move on to you. And once again, the question is, what criteria do you use to determine if a resource is appropriate for your online classroom?
All right, the word appropriate, like I guess this is the online course. So like to me, like online teaching is the college level, but the appropriate, I often like hear at the K-12 settings, that's my secondary. So, but I guess this is the online. So, and I'm not so worried about level appropriate. It's more like, this authentic materials can be used for my goal or like objective of the today's like lesson. And so, and also at the beginning of my class, I tell them about just keep thinking, not stop. And when it comes to like without knowing kanji or like grammar, it doesn't matter. Like you see the context clues using. That's like building their interpretive communication skills and works best with the authentic materials for sure. So this summer, like last month, I participated 2-day workshop it's hosted by the New York State Education Department. And the New York State Education Department like modified like World Readiness Standard, National Standard into their World Language Standard. So like they modified recently. So like the teachers at the New York State K-12 teachers, we have to learn how to use the authentic materials. And I wanted to introduce to you because it actually helped my summer course, which I'm teaching right now, an online course. And it's the methodology called chunking. And like I often use like the Tokyo Metro public rule posters, and it's like with the image and like illustration and the Japanese writings, it's great. Like we talks about like public rules, but for them, they have to make sure everybody understand. So they have to put English, sometimes Chinese, and like on the poster. So what am I supposed to use those like, with the English, like it's apparently like talks about the public rules in Japan. So like, with this New York State chunking things, they said it's okay to use a part of the authentic materials, not modifying. It's the part of the authentic materials or like covers, like when you don't want to use. So like giving them with using this chunking technique and giving the student which part they have to like more put the attention on. So I decided to use, this works for the college student even. So, and I decided to put a lots of chunking. So like I'm giving them like the authentic materials and without being overwhelmed. So, and I wanted to introduce this one. And then this is my goal, not the sentence structure, okay? And the public rules, and gradually at the end, like they have to tell themselves support that the Japanese students are coming to New York City and they have to take the subway, but they get used to the Japanese subway system and what they can run, to the Japanese student. So with using this poster, and we learned more like the cultural background, and actually like one of my students who recently went to Japan, they said, why Japanese subways and public transportation are so quiet. Everybody are not talking about like anything, like they are very quiet, even like less crowded train. So, and like we can learn those things from like this authentic materials, and we can bring this into the discussion, and also they can compare with what's gonna like what's happened to like in New York City. What about in New York City? So this one like leads naturally cultural reflection. So like I am a big fan of using authentic materials, and I also like would like to like at the end would like to mention about Canva. I don't know like if you use Canva or not, but the Canva like those are can be authentic materials, right? So like I changed the setting of the Canva in Japanese, so it picks up a lot of like Japanese like posters or like the izakaya menu or like the travel agency flyer, and I use Canva as a practice. For example, like comparing two things or among this menu, which one do you like the best? And I just brings a lot of Canva images to the classroom because it just like simply by viewing those like izakaya menu, it like really tastes like looks good and like makes my myself hungry as well. And I think the learning will be more memorable. So I use these menus, not the alcohol part, but like, the comparing ramen's menu or like yakitori menu, like even in my secondary class as well. So student loved like using the Canva like images, and I like, well, maybe like some people say like, the Canva is not authentic materials, but it's okay. Like I use it anyway, and my student loves them. So, and I always have like bunch of resources on my Canva folder, so I can use occasionally. Thank you.
Excellent. And yes, as you said earlier, it's really important to think about what is the objective, right? Sometimes we can kind of get lost in the weeds, especially if we have some fancy new technology tool. We have to think about what's the objective. And I love that you're making all these great real world connections. And, these are the things that keep the students enrolled. We want to not just have them for level 1 and 2. Hopefully, we have them for levels 3, 4, beyond clear into university. We want to keep them as long as possible. So by making those connections, you're making it more memorable. Thank you for that, Saito Sensei. And we'll go to Love Sensei. Again, the same question. What criteria do you use to determine if a resource is appropriate for your online classroom?
Yes, I think I'll just be, echoing some things that other people said, but I think, the task is important here, right? Does the material match like what I want my learners to be doing at this point? And as I mentioned with like those katakana scanning activities I mentioned, right? Like learners have way less than 80% of the vocabulary in that one. But for the purpose for how we're using it, like it works fine. So I think keeping the purpose in mind is important. I kind of like to push my students, so I'll sometimes give them readings where they understand probably less than 80%. And they're going to have to read through it more than once, and they're going to have to use some strategies to try and figure out what they can. But I like to give them some more difficult readings at some point. So, it just kind of depends. I think most materials can be used somewhere. It just kind of depends on what you're focused on, and what you're wanting to get the students to do. Depending on, how you approach AI tools, I think there's just so much that's accessible right now. To give an example, here at Konan University, where I'm at in Japan right now, recently had a discussion with a teacher, and one of the things we decided to do is to have all the communication from the teachers be in Japanese from like day one, even for students with like zero Japanese. And then there's a little blurb at the end of that that says, um, I recommend using DeepL. A lot of people like ChatGPT. Use what you need to figure out what's going on here. And reply in Japanese if you can. If you need to, if you don't feel comfortable with that yet because you've had zero Japanese so far, you can reply in English if you need to. But, just we're kind of in an age where we can do that. We can just start using Japanese, at least with the written language, from the very beginning, and students can, use the tools that they've got to figure out what's going on. So just to kind of make the point that there's just so much that is accessible for students right now. There's a lot that they can do with what's out there. One last thing that I'll mention is Saito Sensei mentioned like modification of materials. Where I find myself doing that the most actually is with pedagogical materials that I want to use in my classroom. A lot of times those will come, you'll get your text, right? And then at the bottom, there'll be this word box that has like, the words that show up and, what the readings are and what the English meanings are. I'll usually just like take that out and give my students the reading because I don't want them to like, be jumping down to the word box. They're not going to have a word box when they're reading something real anyway. I want them to be thinking about, context, like what do I know about this reading? What is that going to tell me about this part that I don't understand? How can I take what I've got, my real world knowledge, my knowledge from the text, and use that to fill in the gaps? So that's something that I'll do to kind of adjust materials. But like I said, that's mostly with pedagogical materials that I want to use. The authentic materials, I usually just use them as is. But it kind of depends on the task we're doing.
Right. We don't want our students to depend on that word box that won't be there whenever they actually have to use what they're learning in the real world. Excellent points. Thank you for that. And then jumping to cultural context, I wanted to ask the question of how can we use authentic materials to teach cultural content to online learners? And Maeda Sensei, you had touched upon some cultural components as well. If I could please start with you on this question.
So yeah, authentic materials are, great because it's culturally rich. So for example, I like using the McDonald's Japan's menu. So at the very beginning, sorry, my dog is asking for food. So at the very beginning, it's all in katakana. So the students are just learning out katakana. And then the background information, they know what the McDonald's are selling. So they already know. So that, it's something that it's familiar. So that now they just have to tackle with katakana, right? So, and then also the price, then we can practice about the, how much is it? But, not only that, we can talk about the price comparison. Wow, which country is more expensive? And also, McDonald's menu usually has the culturally specific items. In Japan, for example, teriyaki chicken burger that's not available in the US. And in Korea, they have bulgogi burger, or Taiwan they have. So then we can open up for the cultural discussion so that yeah, there's any kind of simple material as long as it's authentic and has, cultural component, its potential is unlimited. So, and then I'd like to share one great resource. The CARA, at the University of Minnesota, one of the language center, CARA Literacy for Lectors. I think Jim-san, you can share this link. So this website carries so much great resources for the different languages, even including the lesson plans, how to use these authentic materials at a different level. And they also had multiple great workshops, and I participated two of them. One was using multi-literacies pedagogy with novice lector learners by Dr. Yumi Kumagaya at Smith College. And, she was talking about all kind of things we just, discussed about the authentic material use and the cultural component and tasks and scaffolding and so forth. So I highly recommend you to go into that site. Yeah, that's all.
I love that you used McDonald's menu. I mean, you think, oh, Japanese culture, let's make authentic connections with Japanese culture. And it's like, well, no, actually, the McDonald's menu is a great way to have students connect with the Japanese culture and make comparisons and draw comparisons to their own culture. So I love the cross-cultural components of this. Thank you for that, Maeda Sensei. Saito Sensei, I'd love to hear from you. And again, the question is, how can we use authentic materials to teach cultural content to online learners?
Yeah, I pretty much mentioned the last questions, but like, I would like to add that so I believe that authentic materials are one of the best way to bring the culture for sure. And it's not even on the lines of the words, like all the pictures and background and like people's like facial expression, everything it's connected with the culture. And what they can take away from that one picture or like one authentic materials is it's really depends on the student. But I also like with using the chunking like technique, like I can bring them to the attention, like, what types of like culture like it shows. And the context clues are very important. And also like, that build like interpretive reading and stop like reading, and don't worry, like it's okay. The safe environment is also very important. And also another important step is the discussion, especially like, my class is synchronous online flipped learning. And so flipped learning, one thing like it works really well for the online environment. I can give them like all the materials that takes a quite good amount of time on my, like I call like synchronous time is premium time, and that they can discuss and they can talk with me in Japanese and they can see each other's mistakes and hear. And also they have this software model, they have like the breakout room time always. And breakout room time is helping each other. The student who understand very well, they can be kind of like the peer tutor in the breakout room session. And I know there is a resource that like the teaching something you learned is actually helps that student's retention. So, and I provide this environment for the each other's like understanding, and student who fail to watch the video or didn't do the assignment before coming to the class, but still they can try to catch up like with this breakout room. And that's the system of my class. And in the breakout room, like I give them like authentic materials, like it's the full of, I was gonna give you one of the like Canva like resources that I've been collecting all the menus. And then like, I give them like this link, and like whatever the like the materials like they can bring up with using that materials and going into the discussion or like conversation practice. So and like entire classroom settings and together with the authentic materials is something like very essential for my teaching.
There is some kind of a magic that seems to happen when, especially in the flipped classroom, where the students are coming hopefully prepared. I know some more than
Yeah.
others, but they're coming prepared and they're working in these small group settings where there's a lot of back and forth between the students, between the instructor, and getting those authentic materials into the mix. It's just perfect. So thank you so much for sharing that with us. We'll move to Love Sensei. Same question. How can we use authentic materials to teach cultural content to online learners?
Yeah, I think in general, just, the more the better, right? The more that you can use authentic materials and get things in there from Japan, the better. So, another example from my colleague Shun Mariyama, he when he's doing a grammar lesson, like he'll often take excerpts from like manga and just bring them in and see like, here's how this character from, One Piece is using this grammar pattern, right? Or this word. And not only do you kind of have the opportunity to discuss about the culture, and you can, bringing in something that students are likely to be, familiar with and enjoy. But also, if it's widely known enough, there's going to be a number of students in the classroom that actually have a lot of context that they can bring to whatever you're talking, right? They kind of know the characters and they know how they interrelate with each other, right? They know their relationships. And so, it kind of, I think, helps the learners to also get a deeper understanding of what's going on. One other thing that I'll mention is that I, in particular, like to draw students' attention to things that I think that they might not notice when I'm bringing, something authentic into the classroom. For example, we can have an excerpt of a conversation from, maybe it's a show, or maybe it's a novel or a manga or something. But taking a moment to say, did you notice that we've got like a senpai kohai relationship going on here? And did you notice that we've got one person that's using maybe a contracted desmos, right, like this tamekeigo, and one student that's speaking like completely informally, like did you pick up on that? Did you pick up on these aren't just like two students that are having an equal relationship? There's a little bit of something different going on here. So I think pulling those things out that maybe students aren't going to notice without someone giving them a little bit of guidance is really helpful for getting them to engage with cultural content, and in particular cultural content that's going to be really useful for them as they're trying to use the language.
That's a really neat way to bring that cultural aspect of thinking about relationships and how things differ in Japan. So I really like the idea of pointing that out in something like an everyday conversation in a manga. Very cool. Thank you for that, Love Sensei. And Bostwick Sensei, let's go to you again. Same question. How can we use authentic materials to teach cultural content to online learners?
I'm not going to be able to add much different than what everyone else has already said. You've already given some really good ideas, but I do have to say that we also try to include some YouTube videos that demonstrate different cultural aspects between Japan and the United States. And like Luft Sensei said, sometimes students won't recognize the nuances and the differences. So sometimes we like to point that out. But also I found myself learning much more about my own culture when I started learning about the Japanese culture. So I think that's good for our students to reflect on their own culture at the same time when they're trying to learn about Japanese culture. And also too, as they're learning about one topic, for example, let's say we're learning about different festivals. Well, they start learning something about that festival, but then that takes them down a rabbit hole, maybe about the history, maybe about some other kind of clothing. Just they can learn so much more than what our actual task is if we guide them in the right direction. So I think that's what we would like them to do, is become learners that they would self-learn and be self-motivated to learn more things than just what we have them maybe prescribed to learn according to our standards. So I think if we add options that allow students to learn more, then I think that's all for the better. We also have some resources that talk about and give students some examples of some different anime and have them realize that anime is not just Japanese, it's also American anime is anime. So I think it's just really good to point some different things out to them to help them learn culturally, but then also learn more about themselves as well.
That is an excellent point. And again, a lot of us have grown up with Disney and whatnot. So there is that context of we can compare it to something we grew up with in America and see how maybe Japanese children grow up with anime. And there's a lot of cross culture as well now that we have the internet and things like Netflix to bring these things into our homes. Thank you for that, Bostwick Sensei. This has been an absolutely fantastic conversation. A lot of good things also in the chat. I do want to point out that there are a lot of amazing resources that have been shared in the chat. So if you haven't had a chance to pop in and check out some of these resources in the chat for all of our participants, I would strongly recommend doing so. Lots of things I personally will be bookmarking, because there's a lot of great content in here. I would be happy to take questions from the audience at this time. If anybody would like to either come off mute or if you'd like to type a question in the chat, please feel free to do so. We absolutely love getting questions from our participants. So anything that you would like to add, please do. I did see a comment in the chat that I thought was a little surprising from, and forgive me if I'm not saying this correctly, but Sula Yao Sensei has a challenge to assess students, their writing and their activities because of there being over 400 students in class each semester. And that can be challenging whenever we have, which is great. We want a lot of people to be interested in learning Japanese, but it's a balance to make sure that we as online instructors are giving our students individual feedback they need to keep growing. But when you have so many, it can definitely be challenging. Does anyone have any tips or strategies that might be helpful, especially for having so many students in a semester? I'll just open that up to any of our panelists. Go ahead, Left Sensei, please.
Yeah, so just two quick comments. I was in a situation when I first got to the University of Pittsburgh, not like 400 students. It was like, 100 students, but still it was similar situation. The grading was just overwhelming. I was eventually able to negotiate with the university to get a grader to help me with the grading, and that's the main way that we resolved that problem. So if that's an option, like, just talking to the administration and being like, you're asking me to teach a class of 400 students, like, we can get some assistance here. Hopefully they'd be willing to listen to that because, a class of 400 students is fantastic. It's absolutely wonderful. The other thing that I'll mention is that, even with smaller classes, like I will often assign things, but not go through and like grade the entire thing. Like sometimes it's just based on completion. There's some, I think, practicalities that, affect the teaching task. And, ideally you're giving students lots of feedback, right? And helping them improve on everything. But there's a place for fluency activities too, which are, activities where students are just getting better at doing what they've learned how to do already. There's an automaticity component, and there is a benefit to getting students just learning the language, and getting them practice, without even giving them any feedback on what they're doing. So just a couple thoughts there.
Definitely. So I would agree. I would echo the sentiment of advocating to potentially get some help with that much grading. I would agree with that completely. Thank you. Saito Sensei, please go ahead.
Yes, I wanted to share with you. I have never tried this with the 400 student, but I've tried this with my middle school class and it works. Apparently, middle school, it's the beginner's class, like novice level. And what I do is it's kind of like the peer reviewing, but in introducing peer reviewing, I have to teach them two things. One, it's I have to give them a lesson. It's called machigai sagashi, like finding the mistake in the sentence from the sentence. And I purposely write the incorrect particles or the past tense, present tense, like those things, and open to the classroom. Okay, can you find the mistakes here, and give them where to see in the sentence. And it actually works. Like I do a lot of tasks and project, and student has to write the sentences. But after I give them this machigai sagashi lesson, then like they start to pay more attention, like closer attention to like those like tense or like, the small, tiny like grammatical point. And then like one day, okay, like we finish writing and let's switch with the partner and we do the machigai sagashi and the same exact like, the process, and they have to use the highlighter or like, giving them like comment each other. That after that, of course, I correct those papers and like review like what they did and what they didn't do. So, but that even helps my like grading time like even shorter, and like makes like everybody like start to pay like small details about the sentences. So I just wanted to introduce to you. I don't know if it's gonna work for the 400 student though, but yes.
Love the idea. And whenever students have to be a little bit more mindful and careful about some of the smaller mistakes, the things that I find myself correcting over and over again, yes, that makes them more proficient. So I really appreciate that suggestion, Saito-san. We'll also add in, personally, I am a big fan of the text expander tools. And I have a lot of different resources or just snippet videos, different things students can look at. So if I find that there's maybe one of those common mistakes, I can refer them to one of those resources that can drill down a little bit more about maybe why we use the particle "oh" here instead of the particle "ni" if I'm finding students are misusing something like particles. So just another idea I wanted to throw out there. Any other thoughts about maybe some hacks? Go ahead, please, Maeda sensei.
Yes, so I'd like to piggyback on other sensei, but I also use facilitators to, grade. And also I use AI. So some of my assignments are AI enhanced. So the student have to walk it through with AI. So do this one and then get the feedback from AI, and then submit me the reflection and what was your mistakes and how you learned it and how you fixed it. So that's true. That's you can do. And also self-assessment. Give my student a specific rubric. And okay, after you completed this assignment, use this rubric and do the self-assessment. So did you use this, particles correct or that? So it takes training, but you can do that. And also, when you are grading 400 students, don't you notice that, gee, I'm writing the same feedback again, right? So that means I will just collect those, couple of common mistakes and then address that during the class time. Hey, great job, but, these are the common issues you all had. So let's go over that one. So maybe you can summarize and then provide the group feedback. So that might be working, but 400 students, that is tough. Yeah.
Yes, and that is also helpful if you maybe are more of an asynchronous environment. I will sometimes post in my announcements that go out to the students some of the common mistakes so they can look over that and see, okay, am I making that mistake? Or I'm not making that mistake, I'm doing something right, and it helps them know that they're on the right track. Thank you for that great collaboration between Saito Sensei and Maeda Sensei on that one. Much appreciated. Anything else to add to quantity of students and how to hack that? Great discussion. There's so many fantastic questions coming in. I don't think we'll be able to get to all of them, but I had an interesting one come in, and maybe you don't have any experience with it, and it's just fine. But someone asking about learning either Japanese Sign Language or Japanese Braille for maybe students who would benefit from those alternative formats. If any of you have any experience with anything like that, we'd love to hear about it.
No,
I
I
can't say
don't. No, I don't. But I once had a legally blind student learning Japanese. But in his case, because he knows what kind of tools, supporting tools he knows, he already brought in some technology with him. So he didn't really needs to learn the Japanese Braille and things or sign languages.
It's so great to hear that students are overcoming challenges and they're not letting things like visual impairment stop them from learning Japanese. I just appreciate you sharing that with us, Maeda Sensei. Thank you. Really good stuff to hear. Here's a question that came in from for Saito Sensei. If you maybe don't mind sharing potentially some of those materials on Canva, not now, but maybe later if you don't mind sharing some of those with us. I think that could be very beneficial. I love Canva myself. And so your suggestion kind of challenged me to think, okay, how can I find some more authentic resources on Canva?
Yeah, well, actually, I can share this link with you guys.
Thank you.
So it's like just my collection, and yeah, like I said, I put all the beers, alcohol at the end, so I can like use from this page to this page for the K-12 student. So here is the link. So if you'd like, go ahead and like please go ahead and make copy, or if you don't know how to use it, please like reach out to me so I can help you to set up. So this
I
is one of
really
them, but I have so many. Yeah.
I appreciate it so much. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. Here's another question that came in related to AI. I know it's always a hot topic. Asking, do you know any AI that teachers can use to create chatbots for students to practice Japanese and involve the students in the process? I personally don't have any experience with that. If any of you have used AI to create maybe some chat resources so the students are, really focused on that output, we'd love to hear about it. But if not, that's okay too.
I haven't done it with audio, but I noticed that Chat GPT is getting better at Japanese. When I tried it earlier in this calendar year, maybe around January, the Japanese was not very good. But when I tried it actually just the other day, it had gotten better. So that could be maybe some good question and response practice.
Maeda Sensei, please go ahead.
Yeah, I use the ChatGPT voice function. It's still free, so that during the asynchronous session, students are using that to practice. For example, like the giving advice, so that when they come to the synchronous session, we can have an interactive conversation with the real people working on it. So yes, but the prompt, you have to give them a really specific prompt. So I usually give the students, these are the good prompts and things. But yeah, so ChatGPT is free and there are several free tools. So I can just share the link later. I cannot come up. Yeah, I don't have this right now at this moment. Yeah.
And we appreciate any and all resources you'd like to share. Love Sensei, I saw your hand up first, and then Saito Sensei, please chime in. Thank you both.
Yeah, so I'll mention two things. First, I'll mention Mizo, and I'll put this in the chat here. This is an easy one to use if you want to make a chatbot. It's got a number of like preset prompts. It's kind of geared towards foreign language learning. So if you just want to create a chatbot, you can do it there. You can have your chatbot focus on something specific. So just a really quick and easy way to create some AI things. I'll also mention for our learners, I created a GPT with ChatGPT for practicing at the lower levels. Now, if you get the paid version of ChatGPT, you can create your own GPTs. And it took me a couple hours to do it, but I basically created a list of all the vocabulary and all the grammar points from the first 3 chapters of our textbook, and then shared that with the GPT, and then said, I want you to like have conversations with people only using this. Now it's not perfect. You gotta after that, you gotta train it a little bit, right? But it's really easy to train it. You just get in there, you start talking with it, and then when it does something you don't like, you just tell it like, I don't want you to do that anymore. Now, like I said, it's not perfect. The biggest issue we had is the word Genki. Our textbook does not introduce that until much later, and that's purposeful. We want students to be making comments like, it's really hot out, it's really cold out, instead of just like asking everybody how they're doing all the time. It's kind of like this greeting level comment. But I think there's enough like stuff out there on the internet that the GPT just has this really strong sense that at beginning level Japanese, because it gets a sense that that's what's going on, right? That you should be asking Genki or using Genki. So I don't think we 100% got rid of that one. I went through it several times. I'd be like, don't use this. It'd be like, all right, got it. And then it would use it. And then I'd say, no, really, don't use it. And like, okay, I got it this time. And then it uses it again. And I'm like, don't do it. And it's like, I can see why you find this frustrating. I'll make sure not to do it now. Like that's exactly what it told me. So, it's not perfect, but we were able to get something that actually, for the most part, restricts itself to the language in our textbook. And in particular, I'm sure everybody's aware of this, but at the beginning level, it's just really hard to get learners working with someone outside of the classroom that speaks Japanese because they just don't know what they know, right? They're going to be using all kinds of grammar and vocabulary that the students aren't familiar with unless they've got a really strong sense of the textbook. So having something where they can just, go out there and get as much practice as they want to, I think has been great. And we've been doing some assignments with it too, giving them assignment and then have them afterwards send us a copy of their transcript of how everything went with the GPT and submit that for credit. So just a couple thoughts.
That's a great resource. There's also another one that is in here from Maeda Sensei that just popped another resource in the chat. That's fantastic. And then Saito Sensei, I saw you had your hand up, please. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you very much. Maybe I didn't have to add because we already have like great resources. And personally, I would like to try this Mizo.com, and which I'm probably going to do right after this. And I just wanted to introduce to you, and it's the right after the AI started to boom, and I introduced Magic School.ai, but they have Magic Student AI as well. And this one perfectly fine, works for my K-12, secondary classroom, because I can integrate Magic Student into my Google Classroom, and I can monitor who is doing what from their devices, and I can see their prompt and what they did with the AI, and if I've seen inappropriate using AI, then I can pause them and I can time out them, and then I can introduce everything there. And it has a chatbot, and I haven't successfully made the speaking chatbot yet, but I tried several times that the student can use AI as a tutor, and they can get additional explanation with using the Magic Student. And then also I can see from my dashboard and then what they wanted to know, so I can include the next lesson plan, because apparently that's the area the student needed to help the most. So I just wanted to introduce this link additionally. Thank you. I never used Magic Student for my college class. It's just only for the secondary. Thank you.
The resources that have been shared are absolutely fantastic. So I really hope that everyone had a chance to go through and bookmark some of these. Thank you all so much for sharing all of these. And also, I see also some of our participants have put some really good things into the chat as well. So thank you all so much for being part of this. We are going to go ahead and get wrapped up today. Quickly, I wanted to mention this is related to our discussion of culture. Just kind of want to put in a shameless plug for NCVPS's Culture Cafe. This is a free resource that we have for our students. We like to do presentations in our Japanese department, and I do try to do at least one every semester, but really anyone can present on any topic that they're interested in. So as a teacher, there's so many cultural things that I want to share with my students, but I just don't have time And so it's a great way for us to share some of the cultural aspects. So if this is a resource that sounds like your students might enjoy, coming into Zoom rooms like this, and I can kind of sit and talk about all the things that I love to share about Japanese culture and enjoy that time with the students and sharing with them. So if that's something it sounds like your students might enjoy too, please feel free to check that out. Also, in the chat, Jim has posted links to our survey. So if I can ask if you can please take some time to fill that out and do the reflections. Yeah, thank you, Tim, for putting that into the chat. But it's our survey, and this does help us to make these sessions the best they can possibly be. But I have to warmly thank all of our panelists for the fantastic discussion that we've had and sharing all these resources with everyone. I think everyone has greatly benefited from all the collaboration. And I have a lot of things that I want to go play with at the end of the session too. And so thank you all very much for being here. As a friendly reminder, we will be back in 48 hours from the start time of our session earlier today. And that will be our session focused a little bit more on the learner to learner interaction. I know that's a topic that a lot of online teachers want to hear more about. So we want to warmly invite all of you back. But otherwise, we'll see all of you back here in 48, well, for 48 from when we started, 48 hours from when we started. And thank you all very much for being here. Kokoro kara kanchas deimasu. Truly from my heart, I'm grateful. Thank you all so much for being part of this. And we will see you in about 48 hours. Thank you, everyone. Aloha.